So glad that you chose to be at Milestone Church today. And our desire is to be a church for the community that develops another generation from lost to leading another generation. And today we're finishing the book of Joshua. We started this at the beginning of the year. And so today we're doing the final chapter of Joshua. And what an exciting book this has been. This is one of my favorite books in the Bible because of the life and legacy of Joshua and all that he did there. And so we're finishing that up, and so if you have missed some of the messages, you can go back and you can listen, or you can watch online at milestonenj.org, and we have a YouTube channel you can subscribe to as well and check those things out. We're doing both video and audio now, just for convenience sake, not because of anything else, but just it's convenient and it's easy to be able to catch up and see some things. Appreciate so much Andrew and John, all the work they've done with making the all that stuff work, and just excited for how things are working out there. So last week I shared what overcomers do. Here's what overcomers do, and I just want to remind you of that. When the odds are against you, but God is for you, here's what you do. You what? Talk yourself what? Into it, right? So when the odds are against you, but God is for you, you know this is a God moment. This is God's move in your life. You know this is where God wants you to go. This is what He wants you to be saying. So as all of that works itself out, what you're simply saying is, okay, I'm going to talk myself into it. Thanks, guys. I'm going to talk myself into it so that I'm doing the right thing. I don't know about you, but this week, there's some different challenges I had to talk myself into. And sometimes it takes someone next to me to talk me into it, right? And maybe you've had that this week and you're reminded of the message in different ways. But throughout our lives, we have to continue to talk ourselves into it. When Joshua chapter 24, Joshua closes this thing out. And let me recap where we are so that you can kind of get up to speed with this. So Joshua's been the leader of Israel for 40, 50 years, and as he's been leading Israel, he led them to go across the Jordan River into the Promised Land, and now while he's in the Promised Land, they're into battles with different countries. They get into battle with Jericho. They have victory. They have battle that goes back and forth with Ai, and then they finally have a victory there. They get into battles with different nations. There's 5 nations that say, hey, let's band together. There's a problem here. We got these Israelites. They're just a nuisance. They're pests. Let's get rid of them. So they have 5 kings that get together to fight, and they defeat the 5 kings. And then there's 10 other kings that they get together. They're like, okay, we're going to now take the Israelites on, and we're going to win, and they are defeated then again. And what an incredible victory in each one of those as you walk this through. Listen, if you were an Israelite that day, and you had Joshua as your leader, how would you feel about Joshua? Scale of 1 to 10, what would you give him as a leader? 10 being like awesome off the charts. What would you give him? 4s? 5s? 6? You're not even sure. I'd give him a 10. Everybody's like, I'm not sure. Is this a trick question? This is not a trick question, okay? So here's the reality. As a leader, I think all of us would be looking and saying, this guy is awesome. It's been such a privilege to serve and to follow Joshua. When he gave us I remember I would be thinking back and saying, man, you remember when we went to Jericho, that first battle we get into, and he says, here's the plan, guys. We're going to walk around the wall for 7 days. And then on the 7th day, we're going to go around it 7 times. Then we're going to shout at the wall, and the wall is going to come down. I remember thinking, I think he's off his medication. I think Joshua's weird. What's going on over here? Why is he telling us to do that? But everybody else did it, and if everybody else jumps off the bridge, I would too. So we did. We walked around the wall, and we did this. And that victory was incredible. And then Ai. And when the 5 kings came against us, I thought, we're not going to survive this. There's no way. And Joshua says, come on, let's go. And he doesn't even give it a second thought. And I would go back and be thinking through all of these things and the 10 kings and how they came up against Joshua. And Joshua didn't even flinch. So then he goes and he hands out the inheritances to the different the tribes, and they have peace on the land. There's rest from war. So now he's in his hundreds. He's over 100 years old. It says he lived to be 110. And so in Joshua chapter 23 and Joshua 24, Joshua calls for the people to come for one final message. This guy was legendary. This guy was somebody that, in my opinion, he would be way above the normal person. And if you got to hear the final words, the final message of Joshua, this is a moment that you would record. You would go further than Snapchat. You would make sure it's on YouTube. This would be something everyone would show up for. So Joshua has the final words that he's going to share. In chapter 23, and I'd love to read through this whole thing with you, but for sake of time, I won't. I'll allow you to do that on your own because it really is tremendous. If you're not doing anything this afternoon, or even if you are, you should make some time to read Joshua 23 and 24. It's tremendous. And so here's his final words. In chapter 23, he simply reminds them of the milestone moments. It's obvious times where God showed up and did the impossible. He reminded them that God fights for you. God fights for you, and he encourages and says, listen, here's where you need to be. You need to continue to stay where God is. He won't fight for you if you're running from him or if you're telling him, don't fight for me, very simply. And so he reminds them of how God fights for them. Then chapter 24, Joshua does a history lesson with them and goes through not just in their generation, but goes prior to that and goes back to the very beginning. He talks about Abraham and how God called Abraham out from serving other gods and said, Abraham, I want you to go into this foreign nation to where you've never been before, and I want you to leave what you're comfortable with and follow me. And by faith, could you imagine this? By faith, him and Sarah said, okay, we're going. Where are you going to? I don't know. These young kids, they have no idea what they're doing. They're just throwing everything away. And that's where Abraham and Sarah are. And they go off and do their own thing as they're following God. And they begin a whole new nation as God has promised them. And then there's Isaac and Jacob and then Jacob's children. And Joseph goes into Egypt. And Joshua's reminding how this all happens and goes into Egypt. And now he saves the world, in a sense, from the famine. And then after that, the moment of Joseph's life is forgotten about. And it's like the Israelites are now a nuisance. So they make them slaves, treat them horribly. And Israel, once again, calls out to God and says, God, we need your help. God, protect us. We're in trouble here. So who does God raise up? His quiz. Go ahead. Ready? Who did God raise up when they called it? You guys need more coffee. It starts with an M, ends with an Oses. Okay, good. All right. Moses, yep, they cried out to God, and God said, I'll raise up, say it with me, Moses. Okay, say it to the person next to you, it's time to wake up. No, really, go ahead, say it to the person next to you, it's time to wake up. All right, good. If you're listening online, we don't normally do this, and we normally have more coffee at the door, I think, but we're working on it. So that's history, and so now he begins to talk about how God delivered Israel over and over and over again across the Red Sea and with Egypt, and then you walk into as Joshua begins to lead them. So here's all he's doing. He's highlighting milestone moments. He's highlighting milestone moments. Listen. We need to highlight milestone moments. Sometimes in marriage, you go through a rough season, and sometimes the best thing you can do is actually remember some of the milestone moments. You just stop, instead of fighting anymore, just stop and say, hey, you remember when? Remember when we got married? Remember before we got married? Remember when we had this trip? Remember when we remember some of those fun, exciting moments? Sometimes that's what propels you into going forward and doing some more things, in a sense, together and working out some of the junk you have going on at that moment. And so Joshua's reminding them of the past, reminding them of the milestone moments, and it's not simply to keep them together. It's to remind them of what God has done. God brought them into impossible situations and circumstances where the only way out is for God to show up and do something incredible. And maybe you've faced that before. But then he goes down to verse 15, and this is where we're going to highlight and kind of sit for the rest of our time together. Joshua chapter 24, verses 14 and 15. Let me ramp into it in verse 14. Because it's as if he comes to conclusion in his message. Isn't it great when the preacher comes to conclusion, right? He does that every now and again. But it says, now therefore, now that I've reviewed all the history, I've showed you the milestones from Abraham all the way through. Listen, you're a chosen nation. Remember this. Now therefore, because of all of that, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. You understand what that is, right? When you show up to work to serve your boss, there's two different ways, isn't there? The one that goes and shows up just to get through the day. You show up grumpy and you leave grumpy, right? It's, I got to go to work again, and you perform at the minimum, and that's kind of where it is. You're just there because you have to be. The opposite is when you sincerely, you want to be there. You're there, and maybe you're an early person, or maybe you're not, but you're there excited when you go to clock in, excited to be there and be part of what's going on. And there's that sincerity and faithfulness. You're always there. And so he says, listen, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. Verse 15, and if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day. Choose this day. Choose which day? This day. Whom you will serve. Whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That's the end of his message. He pushes them to a point of making a decision. He points out the difference between serving God and serving other gods. This message is still relevant today. To serve, let me just highlight some things. Serve is an action word, not a thinking word. You agree? So if you go to serve someone, it's not a thinking word of, I'm thinking about it. I'll write a book about serving you or anything like that. It's, I'm going to action. This is an actionable point. This is something I should be doing. It's something I should be fulfilling. It's not a sign-up sheet. It's not a report you write about. It's an action word. That might sound simple and a little bit too easy, but man, that's important for us today, isn't it? I find a lot of people are all about talking, but very little about doing. They think about the actions that they should be doing, but they very rarely make them actionable. I find in my own life, my struggle is there. Don't you? I think about it, I'm like, man, I'll tell you what, it'd be great, and I kind of have these dreams of, it'd be great if I studied this much, or if I prayed this much, and I work at, man, I want to be better at, and I want to get to this level in a sense, and I want to get to there, and I want to go reach this person, I want to invite this person, and I'm thinking about all these things and saying, okay, this is where I want to be serving the Lord, but that's just the thinking part. And I'll even get to, some of you are checklist people. How many checklist people are there? Yeah, I like checklists because what I do is I love them. The best part of a checklist is when you scratch it out, right? So I'll put a checklist together. I'll be like, okay, I need to do this, this, and this, and I'll have this actionable point. But listen, if I do nothing with it and I just let the list sit there, then it's just, I just wrote it down. And some people are satisfied. Some people are happy if they just write it down. And it feels like you got it done if you just wrote it down on a list. How many are like that? You don't want to raise your hand. There's a few that are like, yeah, I know that's me. But you feel like so much better if I just organize my day or if I just get this out on a list. Then I just feel better. And some of you do that in the middle of the night so that you can go back to sleep and get your mind off of it or whatever. But to serve is an action word. It's not a thinking word. To serve God, then, takes time. It takes time. It's that your life is interrupted. It sets you on a totally different course oftentimes. With Israel, their time totally changed here. With Joshua, let me go on to the third one and kind of pull back then. Joshua, serving God, took courage. For Joshua to preach this message, he would understand exactly what he's saying here. To say serve God means it was a high courage, it was a high strong point. It wasn't a kind of mamsy-pamsy of, yep, serve God, show up for church or show up for gathering or just, sign up on this paper or whatever. It wasn't that at all for Joshua. Think about what he went through. As I was reading through this week and just being reminded of this, as a leader, and there's many leaders in here, it is hard to lead at times. Listen, if you're a leader in your home, it's hard to lead. If you have anybody else in your home, you're a leader, by the way. In your community, you're a leader, by the way. It's hard to lead in your community. It's hard to lead in your workplace. It's hard because oftentimes you're going against the grain. You're going against what's normal. You're pushing in a direction that most people don't want to push. It's hard. Think about Joshua. How easy would it be to lead the people of Israel across the Jordan River? Would it take a lot of convincing in your own mind to do this? It would for me. Okay, guys, we're going across over there. Can we just go around, Joshua? It's 100 miles. It's no big deal. We could go around that and get down to the Dead Sea and we'll be over. It's okay. Nope, this is the direction we're going. Let's go. You get to Jericho. How hard would it be to lead in the Battle of Jericho? So, guys, God gave me this plan. This is what we're doing. Really, Joshua? Huge amount of faith. Go to the next few battles. And you would see Joshua again and again and again really put his life on the line. You remember last week we talked about this a little bit. When he was in his 40s, him and Caleb, they report back about the land to Israel. And you remember Israel's response? They were a little bit ticked off at them. When they were giving hope and excitement for the promised land, saying it's just awesome, it's flowing with milk and honey, we got to serve God, we have to follow God, and let's go. The people responded in such a negative way that they wanted them dead. It was not an easy day. Being a leader, sometimes people look at you, the whole congregation of Israel looked at them as if they were nuts. And sometimes, parents, sometimes at home, you will look like you're the crazy one because you're leading. And it's okay when you're following God. There should be a few amens there, especially from the teens. Okay. So Joshua is serving God. Serving God takes courage. He served by leading them in so many different ways. And you get down to the 10 kings, and you just see that there had to be courage upon courage upon courage upon courage as he leads them through these different things. Every step of Joshua, it took courage and strength. It took time away from him. Think about what he could have done. He could have been over in the wilderness prior to going over the Jordan. He could have been over in this other area and could have said, nah, let's not do this. Let's just stay still. Let's be status quo. You know, in our church, it's very easy for churches to stay status quo. You realize that? It's so easy. One of the biggest temptations is to be status quo and stay plateaued. Over 85% of churches in America are plateaued or declining according to all the statistics and reading that I've done. They're not trying to charge forward. They're not trying to grow. They talk about it, but that's as far as it goes. They don't make plans for, they don't think about and strategize toward, they don't make ambitious goals for, they don't encourage the people to do specific and clear tasks, and that's something that didn't happen. About 10 or 15 years ago, or 12 years ago, God really convicted me about that and said, no, this needs to change. And Pastor Vaughn and I, in 2004, literally, Pastor Vaughn and I, he was the previous pastor, we prayed about different things, and we're like, we need to be really reaching the community. We're not doing an effective job here. And that's where all of the stuff began that we're seeing now with Milestone Church. It began in 2004. And if you're here back then, you remember the slogan. Remember what it was? More in '04. It's a negative statement now because it was in that season that we saw about 18 families move out of the area, and we went from here to, it was the weirdest growth strategy we've ever seen. But God revealed in that. God revealed and pushed in that a whole new group of people that said, no, we've got to charge this mountain. We've got to fight. We have to reach this community. And this year, in 2018, we're seeing some things come about that we've never seen before. Why? Because we said we can't stay still. We can't stay plateaued. We can't just be a status quo here in this community. And I hope that as you're here with me, that you're saying the same thing. And by doing that, listen, you didn't just put on the checklist of, oh, I got the invite cards. I should invite someone to understand or to know or to find Jesus. But you should be literally saying, who will I invite? I'm so excited. Last week, we shared the Pi Squared cards, which it's our outreach strategy. How are we going to reach our friends and community in a very clear way? What's our strategy? We're going to pray for people. We're going to do that genuinely. We'll invest in people's lives and invite them to understand who Jesus is. And I was so excited. We had so many cards that were handed in last week of people that had different names that they're praying for and investing and inviting. We're excited for that. I'm praying for each one by name throughout the week, and we'll continue to be doing that for you. But that's what we do together, you know? And we're looking forward to seeing how God opens up doors there and seeing just God bring people here, not just so that we can have a fuller church, because that's not what it's about. It's about letting people understand who Jesus is and how awesome he is in our lives. And so we're fighting for that. And so here's a summary statement. If I kind of put this into a conclusion statement, and this is not my conclusion, just so you know. We're at the midpoint, okay? Here's my midpoint conclusion. You ready? Serving God requires an all-in moment where you go all out for God. Serving God requires an all-in moment where you go all out for God. That there comes a time where you say, in my mind and in my heart, I'm all in. And from this moment, now I'm saying I'm going all out for God. That where I am right now, yes, I'm right here. As Joshua says back to the people, choose this day, who are you going to serve? I'm saying I'm all in, I will serve. But then from that I'm going all out for him. And I love these next verses because here's what the people say in verse 16. Then the people answered, far be it for us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For it is the Lord our God who brought us and our fathers up from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, and who did this great sign in our sight and preserved us in all the way that we went, and among all the peoples through whom we passed. And the Lord drove out before us all the peoples, the Amorites, who lived in the land. Therefore, we also will serve the Lord, for he is our God. Isn't this awesome? I mean, the preacher comes to conclusion, and the pianist or organist gets up there and is playing this awesome song. You know, which God are you going to serve? And choose this day, who are you going to serve? And there's this hush across the congregation as the organist or pianist is playing just right, and you kind of hear this hush, and the people just begin to shout out, we're serving God! We're in! We're all in, as a matter of fact, and we're going all out because he's the one that did this awesome thing in my life. I'm here because of him, not me. And we say that together. Could you imagine being part of a church congregation like that? I think we're almost there, aren't we? Right? I hope that every single one of you are saying, I'm all in. And I'm willing to go all out for the Lord because of what he's done. And so they respond that way. And then Joshua responds back. But Joshua said, that's interesting that it's a but. It's like he holds him back and he says to them, you're not able to serve the Lord. What? For he is a holy God. He's a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions or your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, then he will turn and do you harm and consume you after having done you good. The people said to Joshua, no, but we will serve the Lord. So Joshua said to the people, and I love this, you are witnesses against yourself, that you have chosen the Lord to serve him. And they said, we are witnesses. He said, then put away the foreign gods that are among you and incline your heart to the Lord, the God of Israel. And the people said to Joshua, the Lord our God we will serve, and his voice we will obey. So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day and put a place, statutes, and rules for them at Shechem. So Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law, and he took a large stone and set it up there under a terebinth tree that was there by the sanctuary of the Lord. So Joshua does this amazing thing. He says, listen, I'm not just going to take your word for it. We're going to make this a ceremony. We're not just going to stop with just this moment of, yep, we're in, raise of hands, yep, we'll serve the Lord. It wasn't just a thinking thing. He was now taking it and saying, you've said that you're going to do this, so I'm holding you accountable. And we're going to put this stone here as this huge reminder, this milestone, as this reminder to you, to your generation, and to the generations that follow, that you said that you'll serve God. And you understand what you're saying by doing this, that if you choose to follow another God, if you choose to reject God, God will step in and take all of this away. God will step in, and it's as if he's going to cause pain in your life to drive you back to God. When you go to Judges chapter 1, to Judges chapter 3, we see the beginning of a couple generations from then, where it says, and the people forgot God. And you see the book of Judges is a book of people that forget and remember and forget and remember and forget and remember. It's a constant back and forth, which looks so much like you and me. It's sometimes you come to church and remember, and then you go home and forget, or you have different seasons where you're remembering God and God is awesome in your life and you're like, yes, I'm going to serve him with everything I got. And you have a run of, I've been at church for several weeks in a row and I'm serving him faithfully. Church is not the center point. It's that you're coming to be charged up all the time. And so that becomes just a moment where you say, yep, I'm there. And so you're seeing this and there's some growth points in your life and you're so excited, but then there's this trail off and you forget God. And we have that in smaller moments in our lives as well. Or sometimes we see it with the next generation. Sometimes I look back at the last generation. I look at the 50s and the 60s here in America. Do you know how many churches were built in the 50s and 60s? It's an incredible amount. Christian schools popped up everywhere in the 60s, 50s, and 60s. It became a huge movement. There were churches that were being built all over the place. The rise of the church in America was incredible. But in the mid to late 60s, into 70s, there was this peak point, and it's now turned around in such a dramatic fashion. Think about the morality in America that's changed in such significant ways in the past 50 years. Things in my lifetime that I thought that would, maybe my kids will see this, and 10 years later, 5 years later, some of the choices in America have changed drastically. And God is being pushed out in faster ways than I can even comprehend. I'm concerned for where we are in America, that we are pushing God out. And when either one of the president even brings up God, as President Trump did this week, he's talked about God in his one speech that he did. It was almost like, wow, you can talk about God there? And Obama did as well at different points. And you would hear these things, and it's like, wow, we've gotten to the place in America where God was, it's in God we trust, to now we don't even talk about God. We've forgotten about God. May we as a church never forget what he's done. And so let me remind you of that, because this is a parallel passage with what Jesus did in his final words with his disciples. If you want to follow along, I'm just going to highlight John chapter 13, and actually all of the Gospels I'll kind of trail through and just be able to highlight the last week of Jesus' life. It started with Palm Sunday, as we affectionately call it, the triumphal entry, where Jesus goes and he's fulfilling the prophecy, and he goes, and as he's coming in, the people say, there he is, here's the one that we're going to follow, and they're proclaiming that he's this chosen one, he's going to be the king. And so as they do, they put the palm trees or palm leaves down, and they put their coats down, and he's riding on a donkey, which is portraying a peaceful takeover. And as he's riding in there, they're excited, and they're saying, Hosanna, he's the one, we've been looking forward to this, and we're following you, we'll serve you, we've got your back. And what they're looking for is they're looking for a king that's going to make it more comfortable for them. They're looking for a king that's going to give them prosperity financially. They're looking for a king that's going to give them the say-so in the government, so that they can be in charge instead of the Roman government. They're looking for things to be peaceful for them instead of the pain that they're going through and being the outcast all the time. And we know that because historically what happens is when Jesus goes in, he's riding into town, they're all excited up until he turns into the temple. And as he turns into the temple, he stops there and he goes in and he does what no one here even understands, because he gets angry, right? He goes into the temple and he takes these whips and he throws these tables, and it's a picture of Jesus that we're like, I don't know, like, can you be angry? I thought angry was sin, but then you read what Paul said, be angry and sin not. So I guess it's not sin to be angry, it's simply an emotion, and how could he do this? And he's tossing these tables over, and he's going into the temple in this kind of a way, and he's saying, here's what you've done, you've made this place, God's house, a den of thieves. This house should be a house of prayer. This should be a place where God is the center point of everything that's going on. But you've got people selling and you're buying at these crazy prices, and this is awful. This is not the way it was ever meant to be. And at that point, the people begin to turn. And throughout the week, you see some amazing things that Jesus does. And you get to the end of the week, and he has what we affectionately know as the Last Supper with his disciples. And he sits down at the table with them. Do you remember as he walks in, what he does in John chapter 13? They're all there. They've prepared this. He sent them ahead of time. And he walks in. Do you remember what he does the first thing? He takes the basin. You know, the servant person that's supposed to be there, that does what everybody, expects them to do. He takes the basin of water. He takes the towel, takes his robe off, and he just takes this towel, and he goes up to each one of the disciples, and he does what? Yeah, doesn't he? What a crazy thing. I couldn't imagine that. I talked to a pastor a little while ago that said they did this washing of feet in a church setting, and it was really cool. I'm like, I think feet are gross. Like, there's no way I couldn't do a feet washing ceremony in a church setting. That'd be like, oh, I'd have a basin for throwing up on the other side. But here's Jesus, and he goes up to his disciples, and he's washing their feet, and he comes up to Peter, and Peter's like, Lord, are you kidding me? Don't wash my feet. And Jesus, it's like he pierces him with his eyes, and he looks at him, and he says, Peter, if you don't let me wash your feet, you can't have any part of me. Well, okay then, give me a bath. I mean, he does this amazing turnaround. And it's in that context, he says, here's what I came to do. I came to serve, not to be served. And he says, this is what we've been called to do. As the master, I came to serve you. You're not greater than the master. This is John 13. He says here, you're not greater than the master. This is what we're called to do. We're called to serve. And so then he goes, and you'll find in each one of the Gospels a different picture of this Last Supper, which is fascinating to study all of them together. So he goes, and then he says, he takes, at the end of the meal, he takes this bread and he pulls it out and he says, this is my body. It's broken for you. And I can imagine as they're looking around, John's looking at Peter, what is he talking about? His body doesn't look too broken to me. He's given a picture of what's about to happen in a few hours. And then he goes to the next, and he takes this cup. And this is weird. But he takes this cup, right? This is my blood that's poured out for you. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. You know, all of this is simply a picture of where we should be. What does serving look like? And I wrote down several things. Serving looks like it's serving the homeless, it's serving the helpless, it's serving the struggling. It's serving by being silent instead of giving harsh and argumentative words in your house or with a friend. It's serving by listening instead of talking over them. It's serving by meeting a need instead of ignoring it. It's helping someone load the groceries in the car, or it's helping someone load up some wood at Lowe's, whatever it might be. It's serving by giving money instead of keeping it. It's serving by volunteering your time and your talents. And I can go through and give you all kinds of psychological reasons as to why serving is a good thing. I mean, Huffington Post, if you Google serving and how it's profitable for you, Huffington Post top thing says it'll bring you these 7 different things: more happiness, it'll reduce your stress, it'll give you relief from pain, it'll give you a longer lifespan, lower your blood pressure, reduce mild depression, benefit your career. I mean, why wouldn't you want to serve when you see Huffington Post put that out, right? It's logical, makes sense. You see, but what serving God looks like is different. What serving God looks like is that I'm looking back at this moment. I'm looking back at what Jesus did for me, and out of that connection that I have with Him, out of that fuels me into serving. And so when I go to work, or when you go to work, because my job's the easiest job ever. Today's my only work day. Tomorrow I don't have to do anything, right? And so when we go to work at our different jobs, you go in and you're like, oh, here we go. Instead of it's, oh, here we go. Now it's, okay, Lord, I'm here to serve you. So what do you have for me today? What child do I get to minister to? Or what adult do I get to care for? Or who do I get to reach out to? And how am I going to handle my boss that's yelling and cussing at me all day and treating me poorly all day, or whatever it might be? How do I do this? And Lord, as I do this, as I serve, I'm going to be the light of the world so that I can bring you glory. It's out of my connectedness with God that I serve Him. You see that? That's simply at work. Now you go home after work and it's been a rough day, but you've been praising God because you've been serving God all day long at work and providing for your family. And you get home and your kids meet you at the door, not excited, but they're annoyed already. Dad, the internet's not working right. Oh, man, my TV's broken or whatever. And you have all these things and you're like, oh, I want to pull my hair up. I don't have any pull out. And you're there trying to just work with them a little bit. And you have all this pressure that's going on. And I've just stressed a bunch of you out, haven't I? I'm sorry. But instead of looking at all those things, you're saying, this is my opportunity to serve the Lord. So before you get out of your car, you stop and you pray and you say, Lord, this is the best part of my day now. I get to serve my family. So instead of getting out of the car and coming to the door expecting dinner to be on the table, expecting the house to be clean, expecting that everything's perfect and everybody's excited to see you, you're looking for how can I serve and be Christ-like to people in my home. And so when they come badgering or pushing or whatever, you're teaching them patience by your example, by your actions, not just your words. And you're working this all the way through in every part of your life. And then when you have to deal with your finances or whatever you're doing, you're serving God in every single part of your life. And as you come to church, you say, okay, this message, I know what this message is for. The pastor's going to get on my case. I got to serve somewhere in the ministry. He wants more nursery workers. Okay. No, that's not it. Look. If you just come and you're just look, you can be doing this pallet wall downstairs. You can be cutting the grass outside. You can be back in the nursery painting. You can be volunteering for the nursery. You can be in kids' church. You can be a greeter wherever. And you can think of that as a task only. And all you're doing is serving, but you're not serving the Lord. Do you see the distinction? To serve the Lord is, God, I get to. And because of what you've done in my life, I'm connected to you. And out of that connection, I'm going to give you everything here. I'm all in, and I'm going all out for you. Man, what a difference that makes. You treat your spouse totally different when you're going all out for God. You treat people different in church. You think of your customers differently. All the different things in life you're thinking through differently when you're all in and going all out for the Lord. So, church, in conclusion, choose you this day whom you will serve. Will you serve God? Not just serve to serve. Like Huffington Post says it down. Like you'll be a better person, fine, but that doesn't mean anything. That just helps you be better. But when you serve out of your connectedness with God, as He served us, it changes everything. So this morning we come full circle back and we look at what Jesus has done for us in this communion table, the Lord's Supper, the Last Supper that we celebrate on different occasions. We come back to this and we are reminded this is why we do what we do. This is why Milestone Church exists as a church for the community, because of what He did for us, because He was there for us. We're going and saying we're a church for the community. And this is why I will love my spouse, love my kids, love the people at work, love my boss, because of His love toward me. And so we come to this table and we remember that Jesus' body was broken for us and His blood was shed. And yes, He died on the cross, but He was raised 3 days later, conquering both sin and death, giving us hope for this life and giving us hope for all eternity. And so as we look at this, I always like to fence the table a little bit. To fence the table is, this isn't for everyone. Do you know that? This table is for those that say, as for me and my house, or as for me, I will serve the Lord. For those that are saying, I'm interested in serving other gods. Like my God is my money. My God is my fame. My God is my reputation. My God is anything else that you're serving. And I want that. And you'll know what your God is based on what you put your energy and emotion and time into and your money. You'll know what it is. And if you're serving other gods, then look, this isn't for you because you don't get it. You're not connected to this. This is for those that say, as for me, I will serve the Lord. And that starts with the thought, and then it continues in. It starts with that milestone moment where you say, I'm all in, and I'm ready to go all out for God. Listen, maybe today is the first day that you really get this, and you're like, it's time for me to surrender. And that surrender point looks like, okay, God, I know that I'm broken, I'm away from you, and so for me, God, it's time for me to follow you. Maybe it's that first moment of salvation where you say, I'm a sinner, and I'm separated from God, and because of what He's done for me, I need to accept Jesus Christ as my Savior. Maybe that's where you are. Listen, that starts today, where you simply say, I'm all in. Lord, I accept you as my Savior, and I want to follow you. Or maybe you've already accepted Jesus Christ. You know that milestone moment where you accepted Jesus, but you've been walking away from God for a season, and it's time to come back. You say, it's time for me to be all in. Maybe that's the time. Maybe today's it. And so here's what I want to do. I want to just give us a couple moments, just in our own quietness, in our own time, to have a conversation with God, maybe in your mind or silently there, and give you the opportunity to say, Lord, as for me, I'll serve you. I'm all in, and help me to go all out for you. Or maybe it's this defining moment where you say, I know I'm not all in. Maybe you're just not ready yet. That's all right. That's all right. I'll allow God to move as He moves, not the pressure of a moment or anything like that, but as God moves, you follow Him. So let's take a few moments, make sure we're clean before God, and that we're all in, ready to go all out for Him. Lord, I thank you for all that you have done for us. Thank you that you have fought for us. Thank you that your Son is a gift for our sinfulness in payment in full. And Lord, I thank you that there's no works involved, but it is simply our step of faith in believing that you have paid for our sins and redeemed us. Lord, I pray that in these moments that you would purify our hearts, that we would not simply say that will serve you, but Lord, it would be actionable. Give us strength there, I pray. Lord, thank you for all that you've done. We praise your name and your name alone. Through Jesus Christ I pray. Amen.